The late afternoon sunlight poured in through the kitchen window, casting warm stripes across the tiled floor. Lydia Cole stood at the counter, her hands moving slowly as she chopped vegetables for dinner. She'd been doing this same routine for decades, first for her husband and daughter, and now for her daughter and son-in-law. It had been 3 years since Ava and her husband Ethan had moved in. At first, Lydia was glad to have the company. The house had felt too big and too quiet after her husband's passing. She thought the laughter and conversation of a young couple would fill that silence, maybe even heal some of the loneliness. But over time, little things started to change. Ava no longer joined her in the kitchen like she used to. Ethan took over the garage without asking, moving in his tools and boxes. Decisions about the house, from buying new furniture to repainting the walls, started happening without Lydia's input. And lately, she'd noticed how her presence seemed to annoy them, as if she were an unwelcome guest instead of the woman who owned the home. That evening, as Lydia set the vegetables aside and checked the oven, she heard Ava's voice from the living room. "Ethan, did you see the power bill? It's ridiculous this month." Lydia wiped her hands on a towel and stepped into the doorway. "I was going to talk to you about that," she said gently. "Maybe we could try turning off the lights when we're not using them, and—" Before she could finish, Ava turned toward her, arms crossed. "So you're blaming us now?" Lydia frowned, confused by the sudden hostility. "No, sweetheart. I'm just saying we could all try to be mindful. The bills are higher lately, and—" "That's not our problem," Ava interrupted sharply. "Ethan and I are already paying for so much around here." Lydia blinked, taken aback. "Paying for so much?" "Ava, you haven't been paying rent or utilities since you moved in. That was my choice, because I wanted to help you save for your own place." The words seemed to hang in the air for a moment. Ethan shifted uncomfortably on the couch, eyes darting between the two women. Ava's lips pressed into a thin line before she spoke again, her voice colder this time. "You have no place here anymore." Lydia's stomach dropped. The room felt smaller, as though the air had been sucked out of it. What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I mean," Ava said, tilting her head slightly, "this is our home now. Ethan and I need our own space. You've done your part. It's time for you to go." Lydia's throat tightened. "Even after everything I did for you?" Ava smirked, not playfully but with a certain defiance. "Yes. Leave." For a brief second, Lydia's mind flashed back to sleepless nights working double shifts to pay for Ava's college. The day she sold her wedding ring to help cover Ava's wedding expenses, the countless sacrifices that no one ever saw. Ethan cleared his throat but didn't say a word. He just sat there, his hands clasped loosely in his lap, as if watching a conversation that didn't concern him. Lydia could have argued. She could have shouted, reminded Ava whose name was on the deed to the house. But in that moment, something inside her shifted. She realized no words would reach her daughter right now. Ava wasn't looking for understanding. She had made up her mind. Without another word, Lydia turned away and walked down the hallway to her bedroom. The soft creak of the wooden floorboards under her feet seemed louder than usual. She opened the closet and pulled out a small suitcase, one she had used for weekend trips years ago. Slowly, she began to pack. A few changes of clothes, her toothbrush, a photo of her late husband from the nightstand. She moved without hurry, almost methodically, as though each folded sweater and each zipped compartment was sealing away not just belongings but years of unspoken disappointment. When she was done, she took one last look around the room. The floral curtains she had sewn herself. The quilt her mother had made, still folded at the foot of the bed. All pieces of a life that she thought she'd share with family until her last day. Lydia picked up the suitcase and walked toward the front door. Ava didn't come out of the living room. Ethan didn't say goodbye. She stepped out into the cool evening air, closing the door quietly behind her. Not a slam. Not a single raised voice. Just silence. As she walked down the path to the street, she pulled her phone from her pocket and dialed a number she hadn't used in a while. "Janet, it's Lydia," she said softly when her friend answered. I need a place to stay for a little while." There was no hesitation on the other end. "Of course, Lydia. Come right over." By the time she reached Janet's front porch 20 minutes later, the weight of what had happened finally began to settle on her shoulders. Her hands trembled as she rang the bell, and when Janet opened the door, Lydia tried to smile, but the smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "Come in," Janet said, pulling her into a hug. "You can tell me everything later. For now, you're safe here." Lydia nodded, swallowing hard. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but she knew one thing for certain. She had walked away with her dignity intact. And sometimes that was the only thing worth holding on to. Janet's house smelled like chamomile and old books. The hall light was soft, the kind that didn't hurt your eyes after a long day. Lydia stood just inside the doorway with her small suitcase and a tired smile that tried to be brave. Janet hugged her without asking any questions. That was why Lydia had called her. Janet never rushed pain. She made room for it. "Guest room's ready," Janet said, leading her down the short hallway. "Fresh sheets. Bathroom's on the left. I'll put the kettle on." Lydia nodded, her throat tight. "Thank you." She set the suitcase on the little bench by the window and sat on the edge of the bed. The room was simple: white curtains, a small dresser, a framed picture of wildflowers on the wall. Outside, a wind chime knocked gently against itself. Lydia stared at her hands. They looked older tonight. Maybe they were always this way and she never noticed. She heard the kettle click off and Janet's soft steps down the hall. Janet came in holding 2 mugs. "Chamomile," she said, placing one on the nightstand and the other in Lydia's hands. "Sit. Breathe." Lydia tried. She took a slow sip. The tea was bitter and warm. She let it rest on her tongue, then swallowed. Janet sat in the armchair by the window, legs crossed, eyes kind. "Do you want to talk now, or do you want silence?" Lydia looked at the mug. "I left my house," she said, the words heavy and unreal. "Ava told me I had no place there anymore." She lifted her eyes. "My own daughter." Janet didn't look shocked. She looked sad, the deep kind. "Tell me how it happened." Lydia told the story the way you fold a shirt, slow, careful, one line at a time. The bills. The tone. The words. Ethan's silence. The suitcase. The door that closed without a sound. She didn't try to add reasons or excuses. The facts were enough. When she finished, the wind chime outside clicked twice and stopped, as if it too was thinking. "You didn't argue," Janet said, almost proud. "You kept your dignity." Lydia nodded, but the nod felt hollow. "I wanted to tell her whose name is on that deed," she said softly. "I wanted to remind her who kept that roof up all these years. But it would have been shouting into the wind." She wasn't listening. She was somewhere else. "Maybe with his voice in her ear," Janet said. She didn't say Ethan's name with anger. She said it like a fact. "He never liked living under your roof." "No," Lydia said. "He didn't." She thought of the little comments he'd make. "Must be nice to make the rules in a house you paid off 30 years ago." Said with a smile. Always a smile. Janet leaned forward. "Are you safe here tonight?" "Yes." Lydia set the mug down. "But it hurts." "It should," Janet said. "You're not made of stone." Lydia let that be the last word. She took a shower, letting the hot water beat against her shoulders. She changed into a soft t-shirt and cotton pants. She folded the clothes she'd worn so neatly it almost felt silly. Then she turned off the light and lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling where shadows moved like slow waves. Sleep did not come. Memories did. She remembered a 6-year-old Ava in rain boots, tracking muddy footprints through the kitchen, laughing so hard she couldn't say sorry. She remembered nights working late at the store, counting coins to cover the last bit of tuition. She remembered the wedding, the one the budget said they couldn't afford, but her heart said they must. She remembered the pawn shop owner turning her wedding ring over in his palm and saying, "Are you sure?" She was. She would do anything for her child. She always had. The house did not feel like a loss. Not yet. The loss was in the way Ava had looked at her. Like she was in the way, like a chair you bump your hip on and finally decide to move to the garage. Lydia turned on her side and pressed her cheek to the pillow. The pillow smelled like laundry soap. She closed her eyes. A thought came and wouldn't leave. What changed? Not the small things, the size, the sharp answers, the shared spaces that didn't feel shared. The big thing. The heart. When did her daughter's heart turn cold? She didn't have an answer. But she did have a shape of one. Ethan. Not because he was evil. Lydia did not believe in simple words. Ethan was charming, polite, quick with jokes people liked to hear. He liked big plans, big words, big promises. He also liked shortcuts. He changed jobs often and called it growth. He spent money and called it investing. He missed due dates and called it timing. Ava echoed him. "We're building something, Mom. You don't get it." Lydia learned to nod. She didn't want to be the person who always said no. Still, there were little alarms. A letter that came with the words "Final Notice" on a red stripe turned face down on the counter. A package of electronics opened quickly. box hidden in the recycling. A conversation that ended when she entered a room. And there was the time Ethan asked to see the house deed, just for refinance options. Lydia had smiled and put the folder back in the safe. "We're fine as we are," she'd said. After that, Ethan's jokes about old rules in an old house got a little sharper. The clock on the nightstand blinked 1:07 a.m. Lydia sat up. She walked to the window and parted the curtains with 2 fingers. Janet's street was quiet, porch lights, 1 car at the curb, a cat slipping under a hedge. She thought of her own porch light, the one that burned low like a faithful candle every night, waiting. She found paper and a pen in the top drawer of the nightstand. She didn't know what she was going to write, but the pen felt right in her hand. She wrote Ava's name at the top. She wrote, "I'm not mad." She stared at the words. They were true and not true. She was not mad like fire. She was hurt like a bruise that gets deeper when you press it. She crossed the sentence out. She wrote again, "I love you more than this house." Then love means truth. Then, "I will not fight you." Then she set the pen down. Not tonight. Words written in pain sometimes turn into knives. She did not want to hand her daughter a knife. She turned off the lamp and tried again to sleep. This time, the body did what bodies do when they've been brave longer than they should. It shut down for a while. The sound that woke her was small. Not the ring of the phone. Not at first. It was the vibration on the nightstand, a little insect hum. It took her a second to understand. She sat up, heart kicking twice in her chest. The screen glowed. Ava. Lydia stared at the name. Her thumb hovered. Twice tonight, she had chosen not to fight. This choice was different. A mother's heart teaches her when to be still and when to run. She answered. Ava. There was breathing on the other end. Then a voice thin and broken. Mom, the word cracked. Mom, please. I need you. Lydia's back straightened. Are you hurt? Are you safe? I don't know, Ava said. Please come. Please. It's bad. I can't, the words tangled. There was noise in the background, drawers opening, a door, maybe the hollow echo of an empty room. Please, Mom. Lydia was already standing. I'm coming. Stay where you are. Lock the door. Okay. A small, scared voice. I'm sorry, Ava whispered suddenly, like a leak in a dam. I'm sorry for what I said. We'll talk later, Lydia said, not harsh, not soft. Steady. Text me if anything changes. She ended the call and breathed once through her nose, the way she did before lifting something heavy. She changed out of her sleep shirt, pulling on jeans and a sweater with quick, careful movements. Her hands didn't shake. Her mind was clear now. Years of mothering do not retire. They rest, and then they rise when needed. Janet knocked once and opened the door, hair tied back, eyes awake. I heard your phone. Do you need me to drive? Please, Lydia said. They moved through the house like people who had done this before. Coat, keys, bag, lights off. The car was cold. The dashboard clock reading 5:42 a.m. dawn sat just below the world's edge. They drove in a quiet that wasn't empty. Janet kept her eyes on the road. What did she say? She needs me, Lydia said. It's bad. Do you think he? I don't know, Lydia said. She didn't say Ethan's name. It floated between them anyway. They turned onto Lydia's street. The familiar line of houses looked strange in the gray morning, like a row of faces before they put on their daytime expressions. When Janet pulled up in front of the house, Lydia felt a jolt behind her ribs. Her porch light was still on, a small circle on the steps, like a watchful eye. Ava stood inside the door, visible through the glass, barefoot, hair tangled, face pale. When she saw the car, she pulled the door open and reached for Lydia with both hands, the way a child does when she is too frightened to pretend. Lydia went to her. She didn't rush. She didn't scold. She put her arms around her daughter. Ava's body shook, small tremors, like someone cold from the inside out. I'm here, Lydia said into her hair. You're okay. Ava pulled back, eyes wet and wild. It's bad, Mom. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. She turned and gestured toward the living room with a hand that could not find a place to land. I don't know what to do. Janet stayed near the door, a quiet guard, giving them space and also not leaving. Lydia stepped into the living room. The blanket was on the floor. A cabinet door hung open. The house felt wrong, like a song played in the wrong key. What happened? Lydia asked, voice even. Ava opened her mouth, closed it, looked toward the hallway where the bedroom door was half open, a strip of dark between frame and wall. Her eyes filled again. She pressed her palms to them and took a breath that shook. I can't say it, she whispered. I need you to see. Lydia glanced at Janet. Janet gave a small nod that said, I'm here. Go. Lydia followed Ava down the hallway. The carpet muffled their steps. There was a feeling in Lydia's chest she knew from years ago. The one that comes before you open a door in the night because you heard a noise and you hope it's nothing, and you also know it isn't. Ava pushed the bedroom door gently with her fingertips. The room waited. On the bed, the comforter was half pulled back. On the dresser, a drawer gaped open like a mouth. On the nightstand, a phone charger was gone. Little absences, sharper than broken glass. Ava pointed toward the closet. Lydia walked to it and slid the door aside. The hangers were spaced wrong. Gaps where shirts once hung. The suitcase that usually sat high on the shelf was not there. The corner where a black duffel bag always leaned was empty. A sound left Ava's throat, the sound of someone failing to swallow a sob. He's gone, she said, finally letting the words out. And, she stopped herself, as if the rest of the sentence would make it real in a way it wasn't yet. Lydia did not finish it for her. Not here. Not yet. She put a hand on the closet door and slid it shut gently, as if not to wake something sleeping. Okay, she said. Calm. Present. We'll sit. You'll tell me slowly. We'll make a list. We'll breathe. They went back to the living room. Janet put a glass of water on the table and stepped back. Ava took it with both hands like it was a fragile thing. Start with what you know, Lydia said. One piece at a time. Ava nodded, tried to speak, failed, tried again. Her voice was small. Last night, after you left, he didn't come to bed. I thought he was working in the office. I fell asleep on the couch. When I woke up, her mouth trembled. I thought maybe he went to get coffee. But his car is gone. His suitcase is gone. And her eyes cut to the envelope on the coffee table. Lydia hadn't seen it yet. White creased, with Ava's name written on it in quick, slanted letters. Ethan's letters. The sight of it made something in Lydia's chest go very still. Ava stared at the envelope like it might bite. She pushed it toward Lydia with a hesitant finger. I can't open it alone. Lydia looked at the envelope, then at her daughter. She didn't touch it. Not yet. She reached for Ava's hand instead. We'll open it together, she said. But first breathe. Ava did, shaky but trying. In. Out. In. Out. The air moved through the room again. Outside, the sky had turned the color of the inside of a shell. Morning was here. Nothing had changed and everything had changed. Lydia felt the old strength return to her bones, the one she had used to lift a child, to carry groceries, to carry bad news, to carry hope. She picked up the envelope. It was light. Too light. She slid a finger under the flap and paused, looking at Ava once more, asking without words, Ready? Ava nodded. A single tear fell to her jaw and stayed there, shining. Lydia opened the envelope. She did not read aloud. Not yet. Her eyes moved line by line. The expression on her face did not change, but a small muscle in her cheek tightened, then released. She put the letter on the table. She reached for Ava's hand again and held it. Okay, Lydia said in that steady voice that had held up so many days. We're going to work through this. Ava's breath hitched. Mom, what does it say? Lydia looked at her daughter, the young woman who had told her to leave and then called her in the dark morning because the ground had given way. She thought of words like anger and justice and mercy and didn't choose any. She chose truth, but not all at once. It says we need to be strong, Lydia said. And it says we need to start making calls. Ava closed her eyes and nodded, as if a sentence had landed that she already knew in her bones. She squeezed her mother's hand, gently at first, then harder, like a person holding onto a railing. Janet exhaled, a sound Lydia hadn't noticed she'd been waiting to hear. Tell me where to start, Janet said from the doorway. I'll write things down. Lydia turned to her friend. We'll need a notepad and my reading glasses. They're in my bag. Janet moved to get them. Lydia looked back at the letter on the table. The words would not change by staring. The work was the same either way. Ava wiped her face with the back of her hand. Mom, she whispered. Are you mad at me? Lydia looked at her daughter with a softness that had survived everything. I'm here, she said. That's the answer. And in that quiet, with morning finally breaking through the windows, Lydia felt something steady itself inside her. She did not know the full shape of the storm yet. She only knew she would not run from it. She had walked out of her home with dignity. Now she was walking back in with strength. The envelope lay on the table like a small white door. What was behind it would change the day. But Lydia understood something old and true. Days change and mothers remain. "Drink your water," she told Ava. "Then we begin." Ava lifted the glass with both hands. She obeyed like a girl learning a simple rule that might save her life. They sat together, three women in a room that had seen too much pride the night before and was ready now to make space for truth. Lydia reached for the notepad Janet brought and wrote the first word at the top of a clean page. Plan. She underlined it once. Then she looked at the clock, and then at her daughter, and then at the little white door of an envelope that had opened just enough to let morning in. "Okay," Lydia said again, and this time it sounded like the start of something that would hold. The letter lay on the coffee table like a small white blade. Lydia could feel Ava watching her face as she read, as if a single change in her eyes would decide everything. "Lydia," the letter began, "not Mom, not even Mrs. Cole." It was Ethan's handwriting, quick and tilted. "By the time you read this, I'll be gone. I took what I needed to start over. It's better this way. Don't call. Don't make a scene. You'll be fine." There was a line about opportunities, a line about no hard feelings, and a line that stung most. "Tell your mother to stop controlling everything. It kills growth." He had signed it with a single dash and his name, like a man finishing a bill at a cheap diner. Lydia folded the paper once and set it down. She didn't speak right away. When she did, her voice was level, the kind you use when you stand on a moving boat and keep your balance. "We'll take this one step at a time," she said. Ava's fingers pressed against her forehead. "He's not coming back?" "I don't see it in those words," Lydia said. "But we won't guess. We'll look for facts." Janet slid a notepad and pen across the table. "All right. You call the shots." Lydia nodded. "Okay. First, check the joint account. See what's left, if anything. Then the credit cards. Then your email, travel confirmations, new accounts, anything." Ava opened the banking app with hands that shook. Lydia moved closer, not to take the phone, but to share the screen. Numbers leapt and slid as the app refreshed. The main checking balance was $32.19. The savings, which had held 2 years of careful deposits, showed a balance of $6 flat. The recent transactions scrolled like bad weather. 2:03 a.m. ACH transfer to Everrise Holdings LLC, $12,000. 2:11 a.m. wire transfer to E. Morgan, $18,500. 2:18 a.m. cash withdrawal, $1,000 branch ATM. 2:21 a.m. cash withdrawal, $1,000 branch ATM. 2:29 a.m. transfer to E. Morgan, $8,750. There were smaller things too, test charges from weeks ago that made sense now. 2 micro-deposits from a new fintech wallet. A $1 authorization at a bus line she'd never used. The pattern was the same. Practice, then drain. Ava swallowed. He did this while I was sleeping on that couch. Lydia kept her eyes on the facts. "Call the bank." She tapped the number on the back of the card and put the call on speaker. A polite voice answered. Lydia spoke simply. "We need to report large withdrawals we didn't authorize." The woman on the phone listened, then said the sentence Lydia expected. "If the account is joint and the transactions were performed by a named owner, they are not considered unauthorized." "I'm very sorry." Ava's face crumpled. "So there's nothing we can do?" "We can still protect what's left," Lydia said calmly. "Remove him from anything that's only yours. Open a fresh account in your name alone. Freeze the current cards. Place a fraud alert with the credit bureaus. And we document everything." Janet's pen moved. "New checking. Fraud alert. Document." The bank rep helped them freeze the debit cards and suggested a visit to a branch for new accounts. Then the call ended, leaving the room quiet and too bright. "Credit cards," Lydia said. Ava opened the second app. 2 cards were near the limit. A third, one Ava didn't remember opening, had a balance of $4,900 and a cash advance fee from 3 days ago. Lydia didn't sigh. She pointed instead. "Call this one next. Ask when it was opened and how." Ava did. The answer was worse than expected. The account had been opened online in her name with her social security number and the household address. No proof of her voice, only the digital yes someone had clicked. A card had been mailed and activated from her phone number. Except, as the rep read it out, the last 2 digits were different. Ethan had bought a second line, almost the same. "It's not uncommon," the rep said blandly. "A spouse can do this, and it isn't always fraud in the legal sense." Ava put the phone on her lap and stared at the carpet. "He planned this." Lydia put a hand on her shoulder. Yes. They moved to email. Lydia didn't know all the menus, but she knew how to look for what a person meant to hide. Search for confirm, receipt, ticket, and check filters. Ava typed. The screen filled with order confirmations Ava had never seen, because there was a filter that forwarded anything from certain travel sites straight to the archive. Lydia had her read them out loud, like counting beads. Greyhound, 1:45 a.m., one way to San Diego, Ava whispered. Storage unit, first month free, key pickup yesterday. Bus ticket to Mexico border. Mom, her voice slipped. He bought a storage unit. He's leaving the country. Maybe, Lydia said, not promising. We'll follow the trail. But first, check the doorbell camera. Ava blinked. I forgot we even had it. They opened the app. Lydia scrubbed the timeline back to 2:40 a.m. A figure appeared in the fisheye frame. Ethan, hoodie up, 2 suitcases rolling. He made 3 trips, suitcases first, then a black duffel, then a desktop tower hugged to his chest like a prize. On the last trip, he turned and looked into the camera. He didn't smile with his mouth, only with his eyes, a small, satisfied squint. Then he disappeared into the dark. A car's headlights flared and went out at the curb. Rideshare. Lydia made a note. Request the receipt from Ava's email. They checked. There it was. 3:12 a.m. Pickup Ethan. Drop off downtown bus terminal. Another email. A booking for a budget motel near the border. Check in tonight. The opportunities line from the letter made a shape now. Messy, quick running. Janet stood, paced once, set the notepad down like it might burn the table. Police. We'll make a report, Lydia said. But they'll call it a civil matter until there's a crime they can name. Right now, he took money from accounts he was allowed to touch. What matters is that we stop any more access and we plan. Ava looked up, eyes red. How do you sound so steady? Because someone has to. Lydia reached for her glasses. We'll keep going. They checked the home office. There were missing folders, Ethan's resume, some business cards, a pitch deck he'd been perfecting. There were also things he had left behind. A sloppy printed spreadsheet labeled roll-up plan, with arrows to companies Lydia had never heard of. In the desk drawer was a worn brass key on a tag stamped with the name of the storage facility from the email. The tag had a unit number written in black marker. Ava picked it up like a relic. This is real, she whispered. Lydia moved down the hall to her own room. The door opened with its familiar soft squeak. She stood for a moment in the doorway and took in the sight as if checking a child in sleep. The curtains, the quilt, the framed photo of her husband on the dresser. She went to the small safe in the closet and entered the code. It clicked open. Inside lay the deed, folded in its envelope, along with a few other papers that mattered. Insurance, the will, a modest CD certificate she had kept separate from everything else. Lydia touched the deed with the back of her fingers, the way you touch a forehead to check a fever. Still here. Untouched. She closed the safe, spun the dial, and exhaled quietly. Back in the living room, Janet had made more tea. The 3 women sat. Lydia set the letter to the side, the notepad in front of her. Here is what we know, she said. He drained the joint accounts after midnight. He opened at least 1 card in your name. He bought a bus ticket south and booked a motel near the border. He rented a storage unit yesterday. He took his computer. He left a letter saying he's starting over. Ava nodded, every word a small nail. Here is what we don't know, Lydia continued. Is there any debt linked to the house? Did he try to touch it? Did he borrow against anything else? What's at that storage unit? And is he alone in this, or did someone help him? Janet added a line. His job? Ava called his office. The receptionist hesitated, then said, Ethan resigned 2 weeks ago. She said it in the careful voice of a person delivering bad news to a stranger. He said he was going to consult full-time. Ava ended the call and stared at nothing. He told me they begged him to stay, she said dully. He said he was the backbone of the team. Lydia didn't comment. She circled resigned on the notepad. Next calls, the storage unit to confirm access rules. The credit bureaus to put a freeze. And we'll visit the bank branch as soon as it opens. It was 7:58 a.m. The world was starting its normal day. Dogs out on leashes, trash trucks lumbering, sprinklers clicking on. Inside the house, a different day had begun. At 8 o'clock, Lydia and Ava drove to the bank. Janet stayed behind to sort papers and start a folder with clear sleeves. At the branch, they explained in simple words what had happened. The manager was kind in the way of a person who has seen this before. We'll open a new account just for you, she told Ava. We'll remove him from the old one. We'll add notes to watch for any unusual attempts. She slid forms across the desk. Sign here and here. Ava signed. Lydia watched the pen travel, the name Ava wrote, the slight tremble at the end of each stroke. It was not the signature of a victim. It was the signature of a person who had just woken up. Next, they called the credit bureaus and placed a fraud alert. They called the card issuers and told the same story 3 times, correcting addresses and setting up new passwords. They went to the post office and asked to hold mail for a week. They called the storage facility. The clerk confirmed the unit number and said access required the key and a passcode that was simply the last 4 digits of a phone number. Ava tried hers. It worked. Lydia made a small sound that might have been a laugh, the humorless kind. He used your digits? Always, Ava said softly. Said it kept us connected. They drove to the storage facility, a place of metal doors and long corridors that smelled faintly of dust and rubber. The manager glanced at the key and waved them through. Lydia walked beside her daughter down the row of units until they found the number on the brass tag. Ava entered the code. The light turned green. She pulled up the door. Inside, there were neat stacks, boxes labeled with a black marker, gear, samples, clothes. A rolling chair. A cheap metal shelf. Lydia tugged open one box and found electronics still in shrink wrap. Another held bottles of cheap cologne, dozens of them, like inventory for a vending machine that didn't exist yet. In the back, plastic bins held something that made Ava make a sound like a word breaking in half. Her grandmother's silver set, the one Lydia had given her as a wedding gift, stuffed in without padding. He took this from the dining room, Ava whispered. He said he was getting it polished. Lydia held the lid for her. We'll make a list, she said. We'll take pictures. We won't move anything yet. They photographed the unit, each box, each label, the lock, the inside roof where a number had been stamped. They closed it back up and returned the key to Ava's pocket. On the way back, they stopped at a small coffee shop. Lydia bought 3 waters and 2 coffees. One for her, one for Janet. Ava said she couldn't keep anything down. Lydia didn't push. She handed her a napkin anyway. For your hands, she said. Ava realized her hands were shaking and pressed the napkin between them until it bent in a clean white line. When they got home, Janet had organized the living room table into zones: bank, cards, emails, unit. She had also found something Lydia hadn't thought to check: the trash. On top, folded once, was an application printout for a home equity line of credit on Lydia's house. The application had been denied. The reason was printed near the bottom in small, blunt letters: applicant not on title. Unable to verify ownership. Ava covered her mouth. He tried to borrow on your house. Lydia picked up the paper with 2 fingers as if it might smear. She read it twice and set it carefully into the unit pile. No, the house pile. She created a new label in her head. He tried, she said, and her voice had iron in it. He failed. Ava looked at her mother like a person seeing a coastline after hours at sea. I'm sorry, she said again. I'm so sorry for yesterday. For everything I said. Lydia nodded. We'll talk about that. But later. Right now, the work is in front of us. The doorbell rang. Mrs. Garner from next door stood on the porch with a sweater thrown over her shoulders and a kind worry on her face. I saw your car, she said to Lydia. I wanted to check on you both. I saw a rideshare late last night. The driver idled for a long time. The young man carried a lot of bags. Thank you for telling us, Lydia said. We may ask you to share what you saw with an officer. Of course, Mrs. Garner said. And Lydia? I'm glad you're here. She squeezed Lydia's hand, then Ava's, then left the way kind neighbors do, quickly, so tears of privacy. They filed a police report in the afternoon. The officer was respectful, took notes, gave them a case number, and said what Lydia already knew. This might be a civil matter. If he's a joint owner on those accounts, it's legal. But the credit card opened in your name without your consent. Keep those records. If he uses your identity elsewhere, call us. He handed over a pamphlet about identity theft that looked too cheerful for the room it stood in. By evening, the house had a different air. The same walls, the same furniture, but the roles had moved. Lydia stood in her kitchen and cooked a simple meal: eggs, toast, sliced tomatoes with salt. She moved quietly, like a nurse in a dim hospital. Ava sat at the table, red-eyed and exhausted, sipping water like medicine. Janet fetched plates and set them down. Eat what you can, she urged. Then we'll rest just for an hour. After that, we'll make calls to your HR, see what support they offer. My HR? Ava blinked. Why? Paid time if you need it. Counseling. Legal referral, Janet said, practical and kind. Ava nodded, then stopped, her eyes moving to the hallway. Mom, she said softly. I told you to leave yesterday. I told you had no place here. The words tripped. How are you not angry? Lydia set a plate in front of her. I am angry, she said, honest as daylight. But anger is not a tool for this hour. A list is. And a lock. A lock. We'll change the passwords tonight, Lydia said. And tomorrow the locks. She said it like a woman saying grace. After they ate, Lydia walked back to her room. She opened the safe again, took out the deed, and this time she carried it with her. She set it on the living room table, where the papers lay in their neat sections. The paper was old but strong, the ink steady. It felt like a spine. Ava stared at it with a mix of relief and shame. You kept everything safe, she whispered. I tried, Lydia said. But safety is not just paper. It's choices. The doorbell camera pinged. A delivery driver dropped a small package on the porch. Ethan's name on the label, ordered days ago. Something about that small, dumb package put a bitter taste in Lydia's mouth. She brought it in, placed it unopened in a corner, and sat. They made one last call that night, to Lydia's lawyer, an old friend of Janet's. They left a message describing the situation in 20 plain words. A minute later, the lawyer texted back, come by tomorrow at 9. Bring ID, deed, bank records. We'll set protections and next steps. Lydia replied with a simple thank you. She put the phone down and looked at her daughter, who sat with knees pulled up, face in her hands. Look at me, Lydia said gently. Ava did. There was a young girl in that face and a tired woman, and someone new being formed under heat. You are not ruined, Lydia said. You are shaken. There's a difference. Ava nodded, a small, fierce motion. Tonight we sleep, Lydia said. Tomorrow we fix what we can. And we draw lines. Lines? Boundaries, Lydia said. Rules that keep love from turning into a doormat. I should have made them sooner. I will make them now. Ava's mouth trembled. Will you stay? Here. Tonight. I'm not leaving you alone, Lydia said. Not now. Janet gathered the papers into tidy stacks and slipped the deed into a sleeve as if it were a photo. She turned off the lamp by the couch. The room fell into a soft, honest dark. No secrets in it. Just rest. In the middle of the night, when the house was as quiet as it knew how to be, Lydia woke once and listened. The air felt different, not safe, not yet, but awake. She thought of the storage unit, the bus ticket, the letter with its cheap bravado, the clerk's voice saying resigned 2 weeks ago. She thought of how close Ethan had come to putting his hands on her house, and how her old caution had kept his hands off. In the morning, she would take Ava to the lawyer. She would sit in a chair with both feet planted and say, we need to formalize what is already true. We need to protect this roof. We need to put in writing what respect should have written in hearts. For now, she turned on her side and looked toward the doorway, where the hall night light laid a small square of pale gold on the floorboards. She breathed. She let her eyes close. 2 rooms away, Ava slept at last, not deep, but real, the kind of sleep that comes after a storm moves past your street and you hear the last thunder on a far hill. Janet slept on the couch, one arm flung over her head, a sentry off duty. The letter was still on the table, but it had lost some of its power. It was no longer a blow. It was a note on a map. Here is where he turned away. The rest of the map was theirs to draw. At first light, the house would wake. There would be coffee and phone calls and a set of keys changing hands at a hardware store. There would be a meeting at 9 with a woman in a neat suit who would slide forms across a desk and say words like title, trust, authority. There would be hard conversations and softer ones. There would be a plan, written in Lydia's square, steady handwriting. And there would be one more thing, something like a seed in Lydia's chest, firm and small and alive. A decision she had not spoken yet, a decision that would make sense of every sacrifice and every boundary. It would stand at the center of tomorrow like a post set into concrete. But that belonged to the next chapter. Tonight, in the quiet, the truth had come out. It had not destroyed them. It had rearranged them. Lydia exhaled, long and slow, and let sleep find her. The house breathed with her, old wood and new resolve, waiting for the day that would ask for both mercy and steel. The next morning began earlier than usual. Lydia woke before the alarm, the soft gray light of dawn seeping through the curtains. For a moment, she lay still, listening to the house breathe. The same walls, the same floorboards, but a different weight hung in the air. She thought of the letter, the empty bank accounts, the storage unit with its stolen silver and cheap electronics. She thought of her daughter asleep in the other room, broken pride sitting like stones in her chest. When Lydia swung her legs out of bed, her feet found the old rug cool and steady. She dressed carefully, a simple blouse, pressed slacks, shoes that carried history in every crease. She tied her hair back, looked once in the mirror, and nodded. Today wasn't about appearances, it was about steps. Real steps that would decide what the next years would look like. In the kitchen, Janet was already awake, stirring sugar into a mug of coffee. "I figured you'd be up early," she said with a small smile. "I couldn't sleep long," Lydia admitted. "Too much on the list." Janet handed her a mug. "Then let's tackle it one by one." By 8 o'clock, Ava stumbled into the kitchen, her face pale, her hair in a loose knot. She looked younger somehow, like the teenager who used to drag herself to the breakfast table before school. She sat down heavily, wrapping her hands around the mug Lydia slid in front of her. "Didn't think I'd sleep at all," Ava whispered. "But I did." "Sleep heals more than you think," Lydia replied. "Now eat something. You'll need your strength." Ava nibbled a piece of toast but didn't finish it. Her eyes kept darting toward the folder on the table, the one with the deed and the letter inside. At 9 sharp, they drove to the lawyer's office. It was a modest building, the kind with blinds drawn halfway and diplomas lined up on the wall. Ms. Alvarez, a sharp woman in her 50s with calm eyes, shook their hands and motioned for them to sit. "Tell me everything," she said. Lydia explained. Not with embellishment, not with tears, just the clean facts. The emptied accounts, the fake credit card, the storage unit, the letter, the attempt to touch her house through the equity application. Ms. Alvarez listened, her pen moving steadily across the legal pad. When Lydia finished, she set the pen down. "Here's what we'll do. Ava will dispute the fraudulent credit account immediately. That's identity theft. Lydia will secure your deed through a living trust in your name. That prevents anyone else from filing claims without your consent. And we'll draft a clear property agreement that states Ava lives here by your permission, not as an equal owner." Ava flinched. "That sounds like you're taking the house away from me." Lydia met her daughter's eyes. "I'm protecting it, and protecting you. If you want to live here, you will. But it will be under safety, not under threat." Ava looked down, her cheeks flushing. "I understand." For 2 hours, papers slid across the desk. Lydia signed her name slowly, each stroke of the pen anchoring her place more firmly than words ever could. Ava signed her own forms, her hands steadier now than the night before. By noon, the process was set in motion. On the drive home, Ava was quiet until she finally whispered, "I don't deserve your help after how I treated you." Lydia kept her eyes on the road. "You're right," she said simply. "But deserving isn't the measure here. You're my daughter. That's the measure." Tears welled in Ava's eyes. She turned toward the window and let them fall silently. That afternoon, they went to the hardware store. Lydia chose a new deadbolt, sturdy and plain. Back at the house, she handed the tools to Ava. "Your hands need to change this," she said. Ava hesitated, then began unscrewing the old lock, her fingers clumsy but determined. Lydia stood beside her, guiding when necessary, silent when not. When the new lock clicked into place, Ava let out a shaky breath. "It feels different now," she said softly. "It should," Lydia replied. "This is your first line of defense, and a symbol that you'll never let someone walk out with your life again." As evening fell, the house smelled of stew simmering on the stove. Lydia had cooked while Ava sorted papers and Janet stacked them neatly into labeled folders. They ate together at the table, no laughter, but no sharp words either. Just the steady rhythm of spoons against bowls and the occasional sigh. After dinner, Ava stood and cleared the dishes without being asked. She returned from the kitchen and lingered by the doorway, her hands twisting nervously. "Mom," she said. "Yes. I need to say it again. I'm sorry. Yesterday I told you that you had no place here anymore. I don't know what I was thinking. Maybe I wanted to feel like this house was mine, that I was finally in control of something. But I was wrong. This house exists because of you. Everything in my life exists because of you." Lydia listened, her face calm. She didn't rush to fill the silence. "I don't deserve forgiveness," Ava continued, her voice breaking. "But I want to earn it. If you'll let me." Lydia rose slowly from her chair and crossed the room. She placed her hand gently on Ava's cheek. You don't have to earn a place in my heart, Ava. You've always been there. But respect, trust, responsibility, those you will earn. Day by day. Ava nodded, pressing her face into her mother's palm like she had when she was a child. The next morning, Lydia stood at the front door with the keys in her hand. She paused, then slipped them onto the small hook by the wall. Her hook, the one she had used for 30 years. She turned, looking around the living room. For the first time in days, the house felt like hers again. Not because she had shouted or demanded, but because she had walked away with dignity and returned with strength. She looked at Ava, who sat at the table with a notebook open, writing out a budget for the first time in her life. Janet was beside her, checking the numbers. The sight filled Lydia with something close to peace. She stepped onto the porch, letting the sunlight fall across her face. A breeze moved through the trees. Somewhere in the distance, a child laughed, the sound light and unbroken. Lydia closed her eyes for a moment and breathed it in. She had been told she had no place here anymore. But she knew now, without question, that her place was exactly here. Not as a guest, not as an afterthought, but as the foundation that could not be shaken. And as the door clicked shut behind her, the house stood steady, carrying its lessons in every wall, ready for the new life being built inside.